Hello Varlets. A new patch has dropped for Psykers and the patch notes is 1.0.25. And in it, the massive change for Psykers is now that our warp charges do not all disappear once our 25-second timer is up. So as you can see at the bottom left where my buffs might be, I've just lost only one charge. I went from 5 to 4. Obviously, one of the things you want to know is how long do each of the charges last before they deteriorate. And from my timing, it appears to be 25 seconds per charge. The one thing that is strange is the fact that when I tick down from having one charge to 0, that one last charge lasts for about 35 seconds for some reason. I don't quite know why or what's going on with that. But in any case, with this change, the total amount of time that you can have going around a mission with at least one warp charge is 150 seconds. 150 seconds of having a warp charge is incredibly good. Having this alone is incredible for Psykers, but the fact that they also went and buffed Warp Siphon, which they increased the damage you gain from 3% to now 4%. So at base, you can have 16% damage, and if you have Warp Battery, you have 24% damage. So you could have 24% damage for 25 seconds. After 25 seconds, it will become 20% damage. And after another 25 seconds, it becomes 16% damage. So you have a slowly deteriorating damage buff, assuming you don't do anything else after you first got those 6 charges. I'm going to just say 6 charges because I always run with Warp Battery. So this change to Warp Siphon, as well as the change to Warp Charges, makes Psykers incredibly good already. Right, this is something that everyone was asking in the open beta, like why are we losing all our charges at once, and now we don't have to juggle charge management anymore, which makes Psyker a lot more enjoyable to play now. The main reason, at least what I think the main reason why this is so good is because of Inner Tranquility. The fact that you can go around a mission with some form of warp charge means that you always have some level of peril resistance. So if you enter an event, for example, with 4 warp charges, you start the event with 24% peril resistance already. That means your cost of your staffs is now 25% less, just starting the mission. Previously, if you start a mission, you most likely had like no warp charges unless you were running Purgatus with Ascendant Blaze, as well as Psychic Communion. But now you can go into a mission already having a reduced cost for your casting means your weapons have a lot higher uptime. That's more brain bursts, more surge stuns, more void strikes, more everything. Incredibly good, just with Inner Tranquility alone. This also increases the value of Psychic Communion as well. Because you don't lose warp charges and you can just accumulate them over time, this also indirectly buffs Kinetic Overload, because it's so much easier to maintain the maximum number of warp charges. Obviously, you won't be using 6 if you have this. It makes this actually kind of okay, especially if you're running Purgatus, since you almost always have 4 charges now. Wherever you can practically hold 4 charges for the entire mission if you're running a Purgatus with Ascendant Blaze. This also makes the value of Kinetic Barrage much better than it is now, because what you can do at the start of a mission, say you start any mission, you just cast Kinetic Barrage and you start accumulating warp charges. Now, of course, you could just take your time, even without Kinetic Barrage, to accumulate 6 stacks. In my case, 6 stacks. But now, after brain bursting 6 times, and let me just vent a little bit here. For the next 150 seconds, my Trauma Staff has got peril resistance on it. It costs 16% peril to cast a full charge Trauma Blast. And I have that. Well, obviously it deteriorates over time, but I had the fact that I have a 36% for 25 seconds, and then a 30% reduction for another 25 seconds, and then 24% for another 25 seconds makes this change so much better, and makes all Psyker staffs much better to use. In the patch notes, well, in the hotfix notes, we also got a buff to our Blitz ability, Brain Burst. We got a 10% increase in damage, as well as a 10% increase in stagger. Now, this might seem really trivial to some of you, but this change, combined with the changes to Warp Siphon, where you get an increased damage to all your abilities from 3 to 4%, helps Psykers hit a very, very crucial breakpoint. I can't remember if it was 4 or not. Yeah, but this is on Bulwarks. This change means... Oh, that was an old bulwark. Let's get a new one. Now I have 5 stacks. So this change means that on Damnation difficulty, which is where I'm testing now, we can 2-shot bulwarks. Previously, even with 6 stacks, we could not. We just didn't have enough damage to take out a bulwark with Brain Burst. But now, as we saw with 5 stacks, I can take it out already. I think with 4 stacks we can as well, with the change to the Warp Siphon damage. So this change makes one of the most annoying enemies in the game much more manageable by Psykers as well. I haven't tested out the other breakpoints for enemies with this change, but I'll do that later on. A slight change as well was to Cerebral Lacerations. This used to be 15%, but it's now increased to 25%. So now they want to make it such that it's more attractive to take for single target DPS like an assassination target or demon host or any monsters really, anything that can soak up that extra 25% damage you put on it. So this buff to Cerebral Lacerations as well as Brain Burst also indirectly makes Kinetic Flayer a little bit more attractive. It's still not as good because between critical peril and 15% cooldown, it's pretty conditional to get, but also because of the fact that you can maintain warp charges for so long, the maintenance of warp charges aspect of Kinetic Flayer is also really attractive. In fact, this whole change just makes most of the abilities here much more attractive because you don't have to spend so much time worrying about losing your warp charges or not getting the full benefits of your abilities because you don't have warp charges. Speaking of which, this also applies to Ascendant Blaze, because previously, if you didn't have any warp charges, Ascendant Blaze just applied a single stack of Soul Blaze, which did next to no damage. But now the fact that you can reasonably enter a scenario where using Ascendant Blaze to wipe out a non-Poxwalker horde, so like a shooter horde or a drag patrol, is viable now. You can encounter a patrol with 4 stacks, just Brain Burst one of them, alert them, and then set all of them on fire, and all the shooters, not the gunners, just these regular ones over here, would die from 5 stacks of Soul Blaze. And that saved you a lot of damage, not having to face tank them or get shot at because they will all just die from your pocket napalm. And that was only doable because you only needed a single Brain Burst to get the 5 charges to hit that breakpoint. Incredible change. So yeah, I think those are all the things that are affected now by the change in peril resistance. The one thing that I'm not sure whether it's affected or not, or whether it's still bugged, is the fact that because we can carry Inner Tranquility for longer, our Deflection perk on our Force Sword should also be affected. But I think I'm reading on the forum that Deflection does not take into account our peril resistance anyway, so I'm not sure whether that is a bug or intended or not. Who knows. But yeah, overall, this patch notes is tremendous for Psykers, and I look forward to playing even more now. See you in the next one. Varlets.